do medical billers do? I have asked and answered this question several times, but today's video, I'm going to give you my take on what a medical biller does. My name is Tamika. I'm a certified professional biller and a certified professional practice manager. Now, I've been a medical biller for 20 years this year, and I have my take on what I believe a medical biller's duties are. So the duties of a medical biller will start with claim scrubbing. What is claim scrubbing? Claim scrubbing is when you have gotten all the information that you need from the coder, from the provider, from the front desk, and you have that information that you need to put on the claim. So you will review that information, whether it comes to you through a super bill, through an encounter form, with the electronic practice management systems, it kind of just comes to you over electronically. You will review what that information is to make sure that it is correct and it looks right. Most practice management systems already have this built in, but since I've been doing billing for years, I just usually review the claim before I actually submit it. So the first thing for you to do is to review the claim, which is called claim scrubbing. Then you have claim submission. You need to actually submit the claim to the insurance or to the payer. Now you can submit a claim electronically, or you can submit it by paper, by mailing it, or by paper, by fax. Well, not technically paper, but however you get it on the fax machine, whether that's an e-fax or a physical fax, you can send your claims electronically by paper, mailing, or faxing it. After you have submitted the claim, then you want to make sure that the claim has actually been received by the insurance company. Now, you need to review your claim rejection report. You usually get this report from your clearinghouse if you sent the claim electronically, or if you sent it by paper, you may get a correspondence in the mail saying that the claim was rejected, but you want to review your rejection reports. The rejection reports is really important to review because it can help you with getting your claims paid quickly. If you submit a claim and there's an error, it went through already, but there's an error, sometimes your clearinghouse can catch that error and send you a rejection report, or it may get all the way to the payer and then the payer sends you a rejection so that you can then fix those rejections. You should be able to fix your rejections pretty quickly, in advance. Don't have to wait too long. So if I sent off a claim on February 20th and it went to the clearinghouse and got rejected, then most likely I will get a rejection report maybe within a day, sometimes quicker, or two. And at that time, I should be able to fix that rejection and then send it right back. Most times rejections are easy to fix. They may be something like a date of birth is incorrect, or the patient's name, a subscriber is not found, or the ID number is not correct. Something that is pretty quick and easy to correct. So when you check your rejection reports, you should also be trying to fix them one time to send them back out, because you don't want to have to wait on payment for your claim. So let me stop here, because those three things are what is going to get the claim out the door to the insurance payer, and will start up everything else. Because if you have not submitted a claim, then the process of medical billing has not started, because then you won't be able to get paid. You won't be able to see if it's denied. You won't be able to see any of those things if you have not submitted the claim first. After this portion, I'm just going to go through different duties that you have. They may come in different order because of different scenarios, but these are the basic duties of a medical biller. So the next one we're going to go over is the reimbursement management. Reimbursement meaning payment, how much you are getting paid from a payer. So that will include your insurance payments or your insurance processing, because your insurance can process the claim, but there's not a payment made, or they can process a claim and there is a payment made. So if they process a claim and there is not a payment made, that does not mean that there's an automatic denial or rejection. That could mean that the claim amount went to the patient's deductible. Now, if you don't know what a deductible is, I probably have a video and I will link that above. But nowadays, most patients have deductibles and they have to pay a certain out-of-pocket amount in order for the insurance to start then paying their portion. So they can process the claim, but they won't make a payment because the payment should be coming from the patient. Now, the payer could also make a payment, and then you would post that payment into the system. Now, the payer could make the payment by a check, by EFT, which is the fastest and the most efficient way to get paid because you get it more quickly. They also have virtual credit cards that they can send payments by. So there are different ways that you can receive the payment, the actual payment itself, and then you can receive either a paper remittance advice or you can receive an electronic remittance advice. If you receive a paper remittance advice, then most likely you will have to manually enter that information into the system. If you receive an electronic remittance advice, you may still have to enter that information manually, depending on if your practice management system and the clearinghouse is set up to automatically put that information into your system. Or you may have electronic remittance advice, but then you can automatically post it. Again, each practice management system is differently, and so there may be different ways of posting it. But all in all, whether you are posting these payments, automatically, manually, they need to be posted. They need to be posted so that you can make sure that the provider is getting paid for the service, how much they're getting paid is correct, if the patient has a responsibility. All of these things will help you determine whether or not you are receiving what you're supposed to be receiving for your provider. Then there will be the AR management. And AR management includes missing claims that somehow were overlooked, denials, appeals, errors, insurance calling. These are a few duties that you will have, or some of the main duties that you will have as a medical biller. Now, how do you miss claims when you go through all of the steps before? I don't know. But I know I have missed claims several times and caught them on the back end when I do my agent reports. So when I do my agent reports, I realize, oh, this claim was not sent out and it's been 60 days. How did that happen? I don't know, but doing my agent report helps me. I do an insurance agent report and a patient agent report every month for most of the providers that I have. If you have a provider that you need to do it more often with, then you have to do it. But the normal practice is monthly. In the agent reports, you will also see claims that were rejected that you didn't catch in your rejection reports. You will also see denials that maybe you did not work on at all, or that you were working on because when you received your electronic remittance advice or you received your remittance advice, you noticed that there was a denial, and so you started to work on that already. But within the agent report, you will be able to see, well, am I working on this denial? Am I working on this appeal? Or I had never known that it was denied and it needed to be fixed. Be sure to check out my free quiz. The link is below. It'll help you decide if medical billing is right for you. And don't forget to check out the merch, the medical billing merch. Check out my shop where I have cups and journals and all the things that can help us medical billers celebrate our profession. Also within the AR management, you will be doing insurance calling. And this is one of the biggest things as a medical biller that we have to do. You may not have to do it as much because we have, portals and we have different ways to find out about the claims for the insurances. But for me, I found that I have always had to call an insurance company. And in calling the insurance company, you may get stuck with the IVR. You may get stuck where you can't really actually speak to someone, and you might not want to. You might just want to call the insurance payer just to see the status of the claim, and then you don't need to speak to anybody. But for me, most times when I call the insurance companies, I want to speak to someone because I've gone through the avenue of either going through the IVR or looking on the payer site to see the status of the claim, or I even received the ERA or RA, and I know the status of the claim, but there's some issue with the claim and I need a representative to help me with that issue. However, insurance calling during the AR management stage is something that you will definitely have to do. How often you're going to have to do that, it all depends, but be prepared for that. Then you have the patient management, because after we have submitted the claim, we have posted payments, we have called about denials and appeals and rejections and tried to get them fixed, the patient may still have a responsibility. We try to make sure that we collect payment from the patient in advance, but sometimes it is difficult to do that, to collect the correct amount in advance. Now, if a patient has a copay, and a copay being a flat amount, $20, $25, $30, it's easier to do that because you know that regardless of what the patient does, for the most part, let me put that in, for the most part, they will only owe that specific amount, that $30, that $25, or whatever that may be. But then there are times when the patient has a deductible or a coinsurance, and so you're not sure as to what the patient would owe. So maybe you might not collect enough, you may not collect at all, you may collect too much. So at the end of that, you may need to send the patient a statement. So after we've gone through all of that, you need to send the patient a statement, and you may also need to call the patient. Some medical billers do not do calling for patients. They may use, automated systems. They may use just statements. They may use a lot of different things. But in my opinion, calling the patient helps, whether it's the medical biller, which I think it should be for the most part, the medical biller, or it's someone else in the office calling the patient. That is a part of what I believe a medical biller should do when it comes to their duties. The next duty is reports. And with reports, you want to be able to give the provider or the practice information about the billing. And you yourself want to make sure that you look at the reports to see where you can improve. Reports such as the agent reports, which I spoke about, or how much revenue you brought in, or how much claims you processed, denials, rejections. You may want to have reports about all of these things. All of these reports can help you make better decisions when it comes to your job as a medical biller and when it comes to the practice improving their overall revenue and, money stream, income stream. So reports is something that the medical biller should supply to the practice, whether or not they're working as an employee or they are working as a medical billing company. A part that is not usually mentioned is refunds. And that's because who wants to give back refunds? But there will be times that refunds need to be given back to patients and refunds will be given back to the insurance company. And the biller would at least be responsible for confirming and making sure that these refunds are correct. Sometimes the payer requests refunds and it's not correct. Or, the patient think that they should have gotten back a refund, but they really shouldn't have. The biller is the one who should know whether or not these refunds are correct and be able to say, yes, we need to give back this refund, or no, this is why we don't want to give back this refund. So refunds are important, and some contracts with payers require that you give back a refund at a certain time or within a certain time. And you need to make sure that you do that. You also want to make sure that you give back the patient refunds in a good amount of time too, because if they're paying you out of pocket when they're not supposed to, they should be able to get back their money for those services that they weren't supposed to pay for. And then there is the patient collection reports. So when you send out statements to patients because they have an amount that they owe, but they don't make any payment towards that, you need to be able to send them a certain amount of statements, how much you determine that you want to send them. But then there comes a time when you may need to send them to patient collections. And I don't really like to do that because it is kind of disturbing the relationship that you have with the patient, as well as you may send a patient to collections, after 60 days of not paying their payments, and then they go ahead and pay the collection agency, and the provider is not paid the full amount because the provider then has to pay the collection agency. So I think a duty as a medical biller is to try to get the patient to pay their balances before it reaches the point of sending them to collections. However, there will become a time when you need to send patients to collections. Now I'm going to go on to some additional responsibilities that a medical biller may have just because they are, a part of a practice, because this is something that they agreed upon, or, some situation. But in my experience, here are some additional duties that medical billers may have. And the first one is eligibility and verification. So many medical billers do the eligibility and verification portion. I personally believe that is a front end duty, meaning the front desk, hopefully, reception, administration, whoever is in the front who is registering the patient, I believe should be doing eligibility and verification. Of course, the medical biller should know how to do that, because on the back end, there may be times that you have to do that if something changes within the patient's, policy, or something is different, you may have to do eligibility and verification on the back end. But I think on the front end, that is a front end duty, and medical billers should not have that responsibility unless they are agreeing upon it. We also have prior authorizations, and PAs are a duty that some medical billers have. Personally, again, I don't think that is a duty of a medical biller. I think that duty can go again to the front end office or to the clinician, to the clinical staff, to the people who are actually knowing the services that are being provided and done and what's going to be needed and all of those things. I think they could do that. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think sometimes the biller have to help these individuals when it comes to knowing the terms of the PA, how to fill it out, all of those things. But for the most part, I believe that the front office or the clinical staff can deal with PAs, but a lot of medical billers also do that as well. Credentialing is the next one, and I do credentialing as a medical biller, but I don't think that you have to be, or medical billers have to do credentialing. I was thrown into the mix where I was working for a job, and again, they assumed because I was the medical biller that I had to do that. But it's not always like that. Sometimes the office manager does the credentialing. Sometimes the provider themselves do the credentialing. Sometimes the credentialing specialist does the credentialing. But credentialing is one of those duties that a medical biller may find themselves doing as well. Coding, of course, is a duty that a medical biller may find themselves doing. Because coding and billing are so closely related, most practices assume or believe that the medical biller should be doing coding. However, medical billing and medical coding are two different things. And if you're a medical biller who does not have the knowledge and the skills of coding, then I don't think you should be doing the coding of that practice or the coding for that practice. But medical billers find themselves doing that as well. Bookkeeping. Bookkeeping is somehow tied to medical billing when it comes to some of the practices. I was a medical biller and a bookkeeper for many, many years. And I think, again, they kind of put that together. An office manager is a position that a medical biller may also be doing. Sometimes in private practices, you don't have that many staff. And when it comes to billing, the provider needs to be able to trust the person that is doing their medical billing. And if you have an office manager who's willing to do the medical billing, most times or sometimes they kind of mix that person together because they trust the person to run their office, they trust the person with their money, and so that person becomes both the office manager and the medical biller. So as a medical biller, you may be required to also be an office manager, of which I was also an office manager for many, many years as well. And last but not least, a medical biller can find themselves doing the front desk position. Again, this may be because the practice is small and the provider decides that I'm going to make the person who does the front desk, collects all the information, do all of that stuff, also the person who does the billing. This can work in a specialty that, maybe doesn't require a lot of information or doesn't have a lot of patients, but it can also get overbearing to the person who's doing the front desk plus the billing. And I don't always recommend that because I always think there should be a checks and balances. And if the person is doing the services from beginning to end, there can be a lot of errors that's being made. But a medical biller can find themselves being a front desk person as well. And I'll see you again in my next video.